So regardless of whether you use cloud-based backup or not, you're going to need some additional local storage for backups. And I have two hardware recommendations that could save you some money and may be the right thing for you. I also have a general observation about storage overall. And let's start with that. The general observation is that for me, I assume every hard disk or solid state disk I get is going to fail, but that most of them are going to last 4, 5, or more years before that happens. I generally buy whatever's on sale. Furthermore, I don't have room in my office, nor do I need a lot of external enclosures for these drives. So what I do is buy the cheapest internal drives. You know, these are just raw drives, and I deploy these in either a Voyager disk dock or a Drobo. Now those are the two, which just so happen to be the two hardware devices I want to talk about. First up, the Voyager disk dock. The URL's right there. Is a dock that connects to your Mac via USB 2.0 or 3.0, and that one's $30, or FireWire 800, USB 3, USB 2, or eSATA for $70. And it lets you use any raw 2.5 or 3.5, this is a 3.5 inch drive that comes out of any machine, like an old-time tape player. You just insert the cartridge, which is a hard disk, in the slot like that. Wait a minute or two and use it like you would any hard or solid state drive. The difference is you don't have the enclosure, you don't have the all of the electronics, and you don't have the bulk really. It makes it a lot easier to transport them and or store them off-site. I don't know, if I didn't have them, I would have a huge pile of hard disks here, and that would be just unfathomable. The two best things about it is I can have a half a dozen or more of these drives in the space one would take up ordinarily. I don't need a separate power supply, electronics, and case for each one. So they just are. It's much more economical space-wise and money-wise, because these drives are always going to be cheaper than a drive in an enclosure with cables and a power supply and all that stuff. Now, my other hardware tip for you is the Drobo, which is a direct attached RAID storage unit, and it's my other backup system. I have two of them. They're billed as the world's easiest to use storage array, and I have to say that is true by me. By array, what they mean is a RAID, R-A-I-D, a redundant array of inexpensive disks, or maybe independent disks, depending who you ask. The simplest sense, having a RAID lets you configure two or more disks so they appear as one large volume to your Mac. Now, both of mine are Drobos with 4 bays, okay? And they cost, I think, retail they were like $350 each, but that came with no hard disks. So they were empty, so it's $350 just to get in the game, and then you have to supply up to 4 hard disks. But you put those hard disks in, they just snap in, connect the thing to your Mac via USB, okay, and boom. So just insert any hard disk you've got, any one of these of any size. You can mix and match. If you've got 2 2s and 2 4s, put them in the Drobo and you'll have close to 8 or 10. It just turns it into one huge disk rather than 4 smaller ones. There are 3 really cool things about Drobos. Okay, the first is you can add more capacity at any time, more storage capacity, by hot swapping a drive. You just pull out a drive and replace it with another drive with a higher capacity. All right, number 2. Drobo is fault tolerant, which means if one of the 4 drives in there fails, you can replace it, just slap in a new drive without losing a drop of data. It'll take your Drobo a while, hours or even all day, to rebuild the data on that new drive, and you won't get all of the storage space on the new drive. So if you put in a 4, you're only going to get maybe 2 terabytes more of storage. The rest is dedicated to protection. But I have a Drobo that has 4 terabyte drives, so it has 16 terabytes. After the overhead for this fault tolerance, I have a 10.8 gigabyte usable drive. Still, having a 10 terabyte drive that will survive even if one of the 4 disks dies is great. So you can use any drive from any manufacturer of any capacity, any speed, spindle speed, size, cache size, no matter what, no tools required. The naked drives, which I've showed you a couple times, look like that. They just slide into the Drobo's bays like butter. Okay? So when your Drobo gets close to its capacity, you get a warning that suggests you might want to replace one of its discs with a higher capacity disc right about now. And since you can now buy these discs up to 8 terabytes for under $200, it's a pretty cool thing when it says, hey, you're running out of space, go get a bigger drive. Now I started out with 3 4 terabyte drives and a 6 terabyte drive. So I pulled out one of the 4 terabyte drive, the one that was in the top bay as directed, and replaced it with a 6 terabyte drive. 17 hours later, everything was intact, and my Drobo went from 10.85 to 12.67 terabytes of capacity. So while I added a 6 terabyte drive of raw storage, I only gained about 2 more terabytes of usable space on the Drobo. That's an acceptable price to me for fault tolerance. That means if one drive goes, it's still okay. If you're afraid more than one drive is going to fail at the same time, which could happen, you can even set your Drobo up to allow for dual disk redundancy, which will preserve your data even if 2 of the 4 drives die. Of course, that means you get even less storage space, but there are applications where that dual disk redundancy would be desirable and worth whatever extra cost, and reduced usable disk space is involved. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that my $350 Drobo 4 bays are the bottom of the Drobo food chain. Most of them are more expensive and have more than 4 bays. A lot of them offer the option of an SSD cache or additional SSD drives to make your whole thing faster. Several of them are network storage devices that connect to your Mac via Wi-Fi or Ethernet, but not traditional USB or Thunderbolt or anything like that. And just there's a big, what I'm trying to tell you is there's a big range, a wide range of Drobos that you might want to look at in addition to my least expensive models that serve me well. And that's all I got. Drobos, Voyager docks, and the fact that I usually buy whatever disc is on sale at my local cheap store like Fry's. All right, in the next lesson, which will be lesson 8, summary and conclusions about backing up and backup storage.